Hello and welcome. You're watching Oneindia News. This is Global Chit Chat, the weekly show where we speak about the recent developments in geopolitics with our guest, Mr. Tridivesh Singh Maini. Hello, sir. Welcome back to our show.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Sir, let's dive right into it. Xi Jinping, Chinese President Xi Jinping, has vowed to have a world-class military by 2027, and he has stressed, to boost China's military capabilities and strategic capabilities. So, if you think that Chinese President Xi Jinping, he is up for the third term this year, so right. So, if he comes for the third term, what do you think is going to happen in the context of the geopolitical sphere?
First of all, this was expected. The third term was more or less a foregone conclusion. Even if you look at the Xi Jinping thought, that I mean, from the 2017 Congress itself, from the 19th Congress, it was clear that he's on the path towards becoming the most dominant figure after obviously Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, right? After that. Now, we have all often, people have often, tried to say, oh, whether he's like Mao, whether he's like, he's tried to be his own man. That's why, this term of Xi Jinping thought, right? But if you look at it, there is more instinctively, there is more of Mao and less of Deng. Meaning that, if you look at for instance, if you look at the thought also, the Xi Jinping thought, there's a lot of focus on socialism with Chinese characteristics. If you look at the economic policies also, they've been more similar. Now, coming even to his approach towards foreign policy also, I think there are certain compulsions where he does have to face a pushback, but he's certainly more aggressive and ambitious than his predecessors. So if you look at, I mean, how the terms have evolved, his predecessors first spoke about peaceful rise, that was changed to peaceful development. Now you have this Xi Jinping thought, and now you have this, ambitious aims, like you've said that, but in about 20 years, 25 years, you want to reach a particular stage. By 2047, you want to be a sort of superpower. I mean, you have ambitions like that. Now, probably what has his aim was that to get out of Deng Xiaoping's thought process, that lie low and bide your time, right? That get out of that. But what has probably backfired so far is, as we have been discussing in early weeks, some of the economic policies, because Chinese aspirations have also obviously risen. With each generation, the economic as they got used to a particular standard of life. Now, to probably his belief, and this is not only in China, this can be in any country, a politician tries to cover up for other failures by on the foreign policy front by taking a more belligerent stance, right?
Right.
Now that has been visible in the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, all if you look at the South China Sea, also there have been problems with Malaysia. Philippines may say whatever publicly, but there have been issues. And even Duterte, who was quite, I mean, he was not anti-China by any stretch of imagination. In 2020, he had also flagged his skepticism on certain apprehensions on certain issues. So that all has been happening, and obviously we know about South Asia. What has happened in Ghana. So, but now, in terms of economics, his pitch was pretty much the same along predictable lines. People had expected that probably he would, because the zero COVID policy has caused a lot of problems, as
Lot
we've
of
been
problems.
discussing again domestically, right? But he
Yes.
pretty much said that we're going to stick with the zero COVID policy, which means more economic challenges. So you have a lot of manufacturing hubs, for instance, again, recently, where because there's again a bit of an outbreak, there's no herd immunity which is developed there. So once you have an outbreak, then you have to go for a lockdown. That impacts manufacturing zones, that impacts the global supply chain, which means that a lot of companies are moving out now. I mean, some obviously mostly to Vietnam. You have, as we've also been discussing, some companies have moved to other Southeast Asian nations, and in some are even looking at India, and some operations have moved. But Vietnam has been the biggest beneficiary so far. So that is the economic side, essentially. But economics and foreign policy are linked. Now, you do see a slight change of tone in terms of foreign policy. So he has spoken about, he has used the term peaceful in terms of the global world order and all that. But there is again a focus, clear thrust on uh, one country, two systems. So,
Right.
for instance, he said that what China did in Hong Kong was, there was nothing wrong with that, and from chaos, you move to a situation where proper governance now. And even about Taiwan, he said that he would want, China would want peaceful reunification, but it would not, if necessary, it would use force as well. So
Right.
there is, but a lot of Taiwanese analysts have also said that they had probably expected he would be even more aggressive. But I think some of the geopolitical and more importantly the economic realities have dawned upon him, and there's obviously a realization that China has benefited a lot from
Right.
global, a modicum of global stability. So too much instability, even China cannot afford itself, especially with the Ukraine crisis. But I think this is, you certainly the military part, unlike his predecessors, the focus, since the focus is so much on expansionism and the vision is so different in that sense. I mean, everybody else was low key. Foundations were laid by some of his predecessors of changing the Chinese track and moving away from Deng Xiaoping's line. But he has taken it to the next level, and obviously, he also sensed the the U.S. I mean, I would not use the word decline, but U.S. clout to some extent obviously has reduced. So any country would actually sense its chance, and but probably I would again say he's overplayed his hand. And I think
Yeah.
this recent his recent address, I think, was comparatively I mean, on especially in foreign policy, it was based more on ground realities with the necessary posturing. But a lot will depend now upon the days to come, because a lot will depend upon the external geopolitical situation as well. How do things go with Taiwan? How does how do U.S. China relations pan out? And I'd also like to. I think one of the reasons also for him to probably adopt a slightly more, apart from the geopolitics, even on security issues, to adopt a more realistic line is also the slight, some of the failures which the BRI has also had to face, because of debt trap and all that. So it's a it's numerous factors have been linked, and I think you cannot really, because if you look at the military budgets also, whenever the military budgets have been, there is some, you can't have an approach like, I mean, obviously like Mao Zedong, that you focus on. But in recent years, when the military budgets have been rising, that has been accompanied by economic growth. So you can't
Right.
ignore that. He will have to balance that out. And I think some of the muted protests are also an indicator about the first point which I raised about Chinese aspirations, economic issues, the zero COVID, because this could really, I mean, if this carries on, the zero COVID strategy, there is going to be a domestic problem. Now, if your domestic
Right.
problems in such disarray, obviously your foreign policy gets impacted, but there will be a thrust on, you're very right, on the military, on expansion and on strengthening the military, but it will be driven, as I said, by external factors.
Right, right. And ironically, on the one hand, China is looking at and having a leader for the third term, and something very different is happening in UK at the moment. There are talks that Liz Truss, who was elected as the Prime Minister of the country in just last month in September itself, now there's talks of her ouster. So she's being heavily criticized for not being able to control the rise of inflation in UK. So what do you think is going to happen in British political sphere if indeed Liz Truss is ousted?
See, there's no, the basic issue is economic, right? And to some extent, this all began, I mean, this has been a chain, as you mentioned. Uh, she's probably, yes, she's the fourth PM since,
Correct. After Brexit, she'll be the fourth PM. If
yeah,
she's ousted, then she'll be the fourth PM to be ousted
fourth
after
PM,
Brexit. Right.
fourth
Yeah.
PM to the outside. As it is,
Yeah.
three have changed, so she's the fourth PM in
Yeah.
office, right? In
Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah.
So I think this has to do with, the, I think it's a problem, one, obviously, of the far right globally, and probably the Conservative Party also did not really, it was not able to, it should have stuck to its earlier line, or, and this, in trying to ape or imitate Donald Trump, uh, there have been, they probably become a victim of their own sort of narrative. So this has to do with that. Uh, and this is, I mean, this is not, I mean, it's all over Europe, this insular sort of approach. So because
Yes.
obviously whatever you miss, I mean, even if there were problems with the European Union, I think things could have been handled in a better manner. And it's not only about Brexit. I mean, you've been seeing some of the remarks about other ministers about immigration and all that. Now, UK, a country like UK, is relies a lot, sorry, on successful immigrants. They are one of the backbones for their economy. So it's the overall narrative of the Conservative Party having gone in disarray. You had first, uh, and the same thing has happened in US. From Reagan, you moved on to Trump, right? So the emphasis on a slightly on social issues or on immigration, it was always a bit more, conservatives were slightly right, but not so right that all economic issues began to get relegated to the sidelines. Now you have a narrative of economic populism. Right. Now, how do you balance that? Suddenly, you want to take the steps like, for instance, when you have steps like taxes, raising the taxes or taking some tough decisions, you can't do it because you move to a bit of a very strange narrative where, as I said, socially, you're really on the right, and on economic issues, you have convergences with the extreme, not with the left, but with the extreme left on certain issues, like when it comes to, allowing immigrants, or when it comes to even certain domestic policies. So the Conservative Party, and generally, I think the Western world has to get, especially I mean, right outfits, center right outfits, need to move towards the center. Otherwise, these crises are going to be everywhere. Today, you are seeing this in the context. I mean, the context is different. It's about Brexit. It's about UK's problems. It's about the lack of stability because of these changes that have taken place. Tomorrow, even in the Republican Party in the US, you're going to see similar issues because uh, it's not about, when you have populism, it's not about an ideology. It's about your that populist constituency, and you become the victim of the, trying to continue little bit is, I mean, obviously it's but natural in politics, but if you take it to another extreme, this is going to happen. And I think, as I said, I mean, US is one case. It happens everywhere because once the extreme right moves, it focuses so much on populism or playing to a particular gallery, it can't balance. I mean, it cannot achieve the promises which it makes to various constituencies, and it cannot balance the contradictions because they mean different things to different people. And finally, we come to the same old thing, the same old thing that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. Now, the prose part is much more tough, and that is what Liz Truss. And even a successor is not going to have it easy now. As I said, in
Right, right.
BJP, that the attention is always on how the Labour Party, because naturally they're losing. But in terms of
Right.
governance, in terms of the stand on economic issues, in terms of stand on other things, Conservatives are also and there is a bit of a tussle also going on there also between those who are, you know, probably relatively from the old school, the Conservatives, and those who are total populist, who model themselves on, the likes of Trump, or who are part of, the Boris Johnson sort of thought.
Correct. So coming a little back to the South Asian countries. So as you know that, South Korea, North Korea, they're again at this conflict, the missile drills and everything is happening there to, show that, we can resist each other, they can resist each other. But South Korea has always, and it's known to, use its soft power to maintain international relations. So in India, the biggest Korean cultural festival, it's called Rangde Korea, and it was celebrated in Delhi, I believe. And like I said, South Korea is known to have used its soft power. So can you just elaborate how it uses its soft power, be it, in the form of K-pop, K-drama? It's widely popular, and it somehow enhances its international relations with other countries. So how do you think that, they actually use, can you just elaborate the concept of soft power for our viewers?
Okay, so that's a very pertinent issue raised about soft power. You see, if you look at South Korea in the Indian context, it's one of the few countries which India reached out after it began its look east policy. And if you see the business linkages, if you see it was amongst the first countries actually which responded also. So that's why if you have a large number of Korean corporates, I mean, so Korean gadgets, Korean cars. If you look at, for instance, close to, there are certain places where there's a significant Korean expat population also. I mean, in NCR region is one. Uh, Certain parts of southern India also you have that, and you also, in fact, now also these, uh, the budget, the stores, retail stores also. So I think Korea has become a household name in India as it is from because of economic issues, economic reasons. I mean, economic linkages rather.
Yes.
Now, what has happened is that obviously, like other countries, because the focus has always so much been on the West, on their soft power, and it's a belief that only the US or UK that they can uh, implement soft power programs and most, but or even and in recent days China, right? But South Korea has done it in a very organic manner. You see, first you have to have something else. I mean, when you say smart power, it's a mix of soft power and hard power, right?
Okay.
Even the proponent of soft power, Joseph Nye himself, spoke about smart power. Hillary Clinton has spoken about smart power. That's where it actually became. So you need a mix of both. Now, in smart power, you have, in the case of India, you have economic linkages. Now, if you talk about this Rangde Korea event, it was a holistic sort of, event in the sense that you had a Korean band, you had music, you had all those performances, but you also had Korea showcasing its commodities, its goods, and
It's
Korea also,
food.
pardon me?
It's food mainly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
highly popular.
food is
Yeah.
influence and everything else. But also, the important part is that they have got a strategy in place, even for things like tourism.
Right.
So, in fact, for many years, there has, for instance, been this uh, a suggestion that there's like a trilateral. So South Korea is already working on, because they know that a lot of Indians, for instance, go to Thailand. So
Right.
you go from if you look at India, Bangkok, and South Korea, or you look at India, Singapore, and South Korea, that becomes one sort of link. And obviously, Indian tourists are looking at other destinations. Southeast Asia is already popular, right? And it's not that South Korea is alien to Indians, because there is a some sort of small there is a small population there also, and Indians, because of, as I said, the other linkages, they are familiar to some extent. And there are also places in South Korea, by the way, where you don't need a visa. If you fly to particular destinations, you get a visa on arrival. So that is also a big
Okay.
incentive. So it's not that all these fairs and these galas and everything they have. It's only about. Uh, I mean, as I said, soft power is not only about that, which that's an important component, but soft power is also about people to people linkages via tourism, which also
Correct.
contribute to the
To the
economy.
economy.
And I think they
Right.
are sensing that. And one more point which I'd also like to make, you're going to see more of this.
Right.
Like, you're going to see more, because see, with the slowdown in China, with the in the economy, other countries are looking at tourists from other places as well. So, like I'd given you the example, I think we've discussed also, like uh, one simple example which I would like to give: Thailand, how it's trying to woo tourists from EU this winter because of the possible power cuts. Right.
Right.
So Thailand is looking at that. Now, a country like South Korea also, which I think would have been receiving a fair amount of tourists from China, it needs to make up for that because of restrictions in China as well. And all the ASEAN and South Korea, they are going to tap all these opportunities because of China's zero COVID strategy, or because of the fact that China is closed, China's tourists are not coming. And they look at various other countries. So West obviously is one. But for South Korea, India is obviously, because of geographical location, because of economic linkage. So tourism is also another important area. And also, I think there's also, India becomes a hub for also, you can, for possibly for manufacturing and selling in Africa. So in that is in the economic sense, that you manufacture here, you sell obviously here as well, but you also sell it. So that's also a vision which they have. Like India and Japan had spoken about finding common ground in Africa. South Korea would also want to tap, the India for its broader foreign policy vision. So I think there are multiple layers to it, but obviously, I mean, you can't be dismissive of soft power. Soft power cannot be the only end in itself. But I think the relationship in recent years, especially, and the other interesting aspect is that the soft power, South Korean soft power, hasn't started off in Delhi or Bombay or any. It started off from the northeast. First,
Right. Right.
K-pop actually became popular there. If you, I was telling you about the retail stores. It's not. I mean, first, personally, the first retail store which I saw, South Korean. I mean, there must be many others, but the first one I saw was a few years ago in Andhra Pradesh somewhere. While traveling, I just happened to see it. Right. So very interesting things are happening, and brings us back to the same point that we're always, and it's but natural. You're focused on the great powers, you're focused on geopolitics, or what really you see and what is clear. But there are a lot of things which are happening under the radar in a low profile manner, which don't get coverage. So I think and overall, I think the India South Korea relationship with a bit of push has a lot of, and I would say even the next stage beyond tourism, even in education, because they have a lot of scholarships, and they have been getting students from other Southeast, see, like we've discussed, CMLD nations like Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. So they've been attracting them. They have students from Africa, and there have also been talks of liberalizing uh, work visas for professionals, providing internships to students who are working there, and then taking that forward. So there's a lot to do, and I think soft power should be actually taken to the next level. It's a good starting, yeah.
So thank you so much for all the inputs that you've shared with us today. And also thank you everybody for watching Global Chit Chat. Catch us again in the next week on Oneindia News.